think almost everyone on this call would agree with the urgency and impetus behind open banking. However, all those benefits are attainable at scale only when we have a well-functioning and trusted open banking system in place. Amongst all the diverse views on what that Canadian system could look like, I think we can all agree on one thing: that's optimizing value delivered to Canadians is a function of balancing adoption and accessibility with the need for stability and security of the system. So today we have the three amazing panelists who have joined us from Portage Ventures, TD, and SimCore to kind of share their views on how to strike that balance. So without further ado, I'm going to start the discussion. And for those who may have questions for the panelists, please put it on the Q&A section of the Zoom, and I'll address those towards the end of the session. But I'll kick the panel off with the question of what are the key outcomes that we should be striving to accomplish with the Canadian open banking system. And maybe we'll go to Ben, who unmuted himself to start, and then I'll go to other panelists.
Sure. Thanks, thanks, Juan, and thanks for having me here. In terms of the outcomes that I think a well-functioning open banking system delivers, while I'd love to say I came up with these, I think the work the advisory committee did in their work on the phase 2 process and the department and other stakeholders that were involved, I think nicely captures what those objectives should be. And I think they list them as, first and foremost, that consumer data is protected. Secondly, that consumers are in control of their data, that consumers receive access to a wide range of useful and competitive consumer-friendly financial services, consumers have reliable, consistent access to services, and that consumers have recourse when issues arise. I think if you've got those components, and you'll note the key word in each of those statements was the consumer, that this is a process that's built around the consumer, then you should have a system that finds and strikes that right balance between the consumer welfare component of the framework and the growth and competition and innovation that I think we all hope the open banking will formally unleash for the Canadian market.
Great. Alina, I might go to you to see if you have anything to add.
Alina has been having some technical difficulties and her audio is not connected. So
got it. Okay, we'll try to get back to her. And then we'll come back to her. Yeah, sounds good.
No problem. So thank you, Juan. And so I'm going to definitely agree with Ben. I think the, let's say the building blocks that the advisory committee kind of set out as kind of key functions or components that should be in an open banking system are the right ones. But maybe one to add, and it certainly came up towards the end of the consultations, was the concept of customer experience. As Ben rightly pointed out, consumer and customers at the heart of each of the building blocks that he spoke about. But one of the challenges we've seen in other open banking implementations is if the customer experience, whether it be through how they adopt open banking, how they engage with the open banking ecosystem, isn't really thought through, that can lead to some challenges. That includes how are they authenticated? What's their experience when they're moving, let's say, from screen scraping to APIs? How is their consent captured and managed? So I think a fundamental building block is really just of a well-functioning open banking ecosystem, and something we should strive to is removing the friction that exists today in customer engagements when they're trying to get access to their data or trying to avail themselves of services. So really keeping that at top of mind in each of these considerations, I think will be really important.
I think that thread around, I think the consumer, I think is such a powerful one. And I think that we can all unite behind. So if we think about that value to consumers, I think we all, I think, recognize that, managing risks for them is a critical function of how do we actually maximize that value. So maybe we'll start on a little bit of those grimmer notes of thinking about what are some of those key risks that you're most concerned about, and what are some ways we can actually mitigate them from the get-go by design.
So maybe I'll continue, Juan. Sorry, I'm not sure if Alina is able to connect now, but So I think when we think about risks, there are risks that exist today. One could certainly argue that they're probably more prevalent today than they would be if we move towards a more stable, and technically sound open banking system. And they're about protecting the customer's data. To me, I think one thing that we really need to consider throughout all of this is how do we ensure that only the right people have access to the right data, and that whatever that access is granted is always predicated on customer consent. Because the risk of data breaches or unauthorized access can be significant and can really erode consumer confidence in any open banking ecosystem that we implement. So managing the risks around data protection, the risks against fraud occurring, are the ones that I think we really need to prioritize. And that starts with really understanding how you're going to handle who has access to the ecosystem for me. So a little bit to me falls into the accreditation framework, like how are we going to ensure that the right people are accessing it, and that those that are accessing the data on behalf of consumers are adhering to a certain base level of standards of expectation when it comes to minimum bars for security obligations, as an example. So I think that's important that those concepts are established and set and agreed to. And those can include things like obviously the data protection and the security, but just general data governance obligations, ensuring that we've got encryption, ensuring that the data is only used for the purpose that it was intended. Data minimization techniques are applied. There's minimal storage, and that there's an associated and robust consent management framework. I think those are all things that are going to be necessary, but it starts with ensuring that you've got a framework to get the right people into the ecosystem, but ensure that there's at least a minimum bar that is set for given the sensitivity of some of the data that may be accessible in open banking eventually.
Thanks so much. Anything to add?
I'll jump in, I guess, if Alina's still not here. Maybe a couple things. I'll use this as an opportunity to get on my soapbox a little bit. I think the biggest risk right now with open banking isn't these more technical discussions. It's that we actually do something here. The risk is that we lose. I think one of the previous speakers made the comment about the fact that we're losing the chance to even be a fast follower on this, and without coming together, both from an industry and a government standpoint, these discussions, quite frankly, are moot. So I think it's just important to start any conversation about open banking these days with that comment, because we're paneling ourselves to death on this topic. And I and obviously many others want to get us to the point of implementation and execution and all those good things. The other point, maybe just, Saba made some completely valid points that absolutely need to be factored into any design. But I think it's also really important to note that the questions around data security and cyber and all of these things are things that any business looking to be a fintech in Canada and engage with customers and move money or use data to provide their particular product or services are thinking about these things. These aren't considerations that are an afterthought. They're considerations that are day one. How do I build my architecture? How do I build my infrastructure? And so while they should be articulated and the conditions should be made clear and transparent, I don't know that fintechs here or third parties need to fundamentally change what they're doing in order to comply with whatever this accreditation model in the future looks like. I think that's just a really important point to make as we get into this technical discussion. These aren't new problems that suddenly emerge as a result of open banking. I think they exist today. The problem is that they're addressed in a whole bunch of different ways. And part of the benefit of an open banking framework is that it brings more standardization and structure to consistently address these issues.
Any thoughts? And as we talk about those, I think the minimum criteria, that a lot of those already exist, and how do we harmonize and standardize? Any things to keep in mind in terms of like, how do we make sure that when we actually do that harmonization, it still is accessible, and it still is not creating that bar, like say in the UK, it takes a year to get accredited. While we certainly want to just make sure that consistency is there as well. So any thoughts on what are some of the mechanisms we could use to kind of preserve that? And I think Alina's back online, so
I made it. I'm so sorry, but I'm a proponent of better late than never. So here I am. I'm so happy to join you all.
yeah, good to have you, Alina. Maybe then start with you on this one around
Sure.
any thoughts on how do we make sure that by bringing right consistency that or the participation model into our open banking system is promoting both the accessibility as well as the security of the system.
Yeah, you're starting with a really tough question because there's essentially the way to look at it really is that essentially one could really lean into stability of the system and really focus all their efforts into that, but that would be to the detriment of really accessibility and having essentially open banking really become what it's promised to be, which really flourishing innovation and having a variety of services that we can't even conceive of, and unfortunately, I have to say each like if you take any single participant, everybody has their own incentives, right? Like if you're an entity that's an incumbent, obviously stability of the system is where things are at. Whereas if you're trying somebody who's trying to break through, of course, having fewer rules and fewer requirements is what you need. So it's really a tough balance to strike. I think the only really way to go about it is one, to have all participants involved and really have all the perspective on the table. And it could, you can think of it as a negotiation, if you will. Ultimately, though, I think open banking, it's while we all have interest in as an entity, there's a lot to gain from it. Ultimately, there is a public policy lens to it, and where that balance should be struck between, do you focus more on stability, or do you focus more on essentially accessibility and having essentially a focus on innovation? I think that's where it's really appropriate for the government to have a role and to really set the tone. Like from a public policy perspective, are we focusing, or should we focus more, on the promise of innovation and economic development, or should we focus more on the mitigation of risk? I know there's a perspective out there that it's not a zero-sum game and we can have it all. But I think in practice over the years, I think a lot of us can see that there's always a tug, a pull and push, and we can aspire to have it all, but it's very difficult. So anyway, this is my perspective. I'm happy to hear from others, but it's just I think what's key is really to have that signal from the government as to, from a public policy perspective, really where do we want to go with this?
Saba, anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, no, perfect. First of all, Lena, it's good to see you again. Glad you made it. I was worried Ben and I were going to have to keep this banter going just between the two of us. Not that we couldn't manage it. But no, I think you hit on a few points, and I think some form of government, let's say encouragement, is probably what everyone is looking for. But I'm forever an optimist in any situation, so I'm really hopeful that in Canada we can have a unique made in Canada solution that is taking into perspective the various participants, because it can't be one-sided. It can't just, Lena's point, focus on just stability or accessibility. If at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is to ensure that consumers have access to better services and that their data is protected and their data rights are respected throughout this process. So it's definitely going to need to be a balance. It also won't be a one and done thing. So I think this is where maybe policy does have a role that it can play in encouraging at least a minimum bar to be established. In the absence of that, I think it's going to have to be a mix of industry participants who come together and agree on what that bar is. Whatever it is, got to be transparent. It can't be something that's decided in back rooms. It has to be consistent, as Ben alluded to earlier. And so I think that those are some key principles that are going to be required. And until we have that dialogue, we're not going to align on something. We're not going to know where, people's lines are and where they're drawn until we actually start to work off of something, work off of a baseline. So I think continuing that dialogue is absolutely important, even in the absence of government involvement.
I would maybe just add, getting feedback there. I would add, the longer we take to move forward, the more insight we'll have from other jurisdictions, right? And finding that right balance, I think, can be seen in some of the numbers. And I think it's interesting even now to see what's happening between the UK and Australia, where, Juan, you made the comment about the time it takes in the UK, but the fact is, there are 400 plus TPPs now that are up and running, with a whole bunch more in the pipeline, 3 million users and growing rapidly. Whereas in Australia, you've got like 5 or 6 organizations that have been accredited, and actually that oversight function for accreditation is being moved to a new department within government. And so I think, you can see some of the outcomes in the numbers and being able to draw some of those conclusions around what that right balance is. And I agree, you've got to find it. But, if the vision we're trying to strive for here is both that economic growth, component and the consumer welfare component, that should come out in, first and foremost, who we let into the system.
Yeah, I certainly really do hope that when we move into this, we don't repeat the same thing, right? Because I think, Ben, to your point, I think that pattern, we've seen that in UK as well, right? In the first year, there are only a handful, and many ways, I think it took more than just the typical development time to actually get to a vibrant ecosystem. So certainly, I think an area we really hope to learn and expand.
And those are, and those, just, let's all keep in mind, those have been like government-led initiatives, right?
Yeah.
The path towards something that resembles open banking through an industry-led approach, I think only looks a heck of a lot messier, and certainly leans a bit more to stability. Likely is to lean a bit more towards stability than innovation and competition.
Yeah, so maybe let's dive into that messiness just a little bit before we kind of come back up to the cleaner topics. So I think all of you mentioned that I think all look to the government to, I think, make certain decisions and give certain indications. I think like many of us, I think we're probably disappointed that the open banking, it wasn't a top priority item in the budget, and we also do have a complex bifurcated regulatory system, especially as we start thinking about credit union inclusion, open finance, and how to actually create the right ecosystem. So I think it's evidently clear that we collectively, I think, need to think about what could be done in a shorter time frame until the broader, data commissioner and open data and consumer data rights, those type of kind of movements are made. So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on, like, where do you what are the practical ways you think we can actually make some progress towards this in the next few while?
So I think 2 things that would be helpful to move these discussions in the right direction would be, one, I would love to see, and as would others, the report by the advisory committee that I assume has been delivered to the Minister of Finance, or maybe soon, to be published. The other signal I think that would be super helpful would be for the government to appoint a lead, if you will, an open banking lead, who could, insert him or herself, and whether there's a secretariat around it, into all of these industry discussions that are going on. And the industry discussions are inevitable. Like, you can't ask the industry to stop what they're doing and wait for government to make a decision, right? I think my fundamental belief is to really move this forward and to deliver on the objectives that we talk about. You need a strong role for government in this. But I think those two things, one, the report would signal what is the direction the advisory committee is suggesting. And I think, at least based on what was discussed in phase 2 of the consultation, it certainly leaned more towards, you know, a strong role for government in governance, but an engaged group between industry and others to bring these solutions to life. And I think, you know, appointing someone who would be able to start to insert themselves into some of these conversations at the industry level would also signal that the government is going to move down this path, that it's inevitable we will have open banking in this country. Ideally, we'll move down the path of a more government, you know, led, at least from a legislative standpoint, but it's going to happen. I think the longer it takes to signal some of these actions, the harder it's going to be to walk back the work that's going on at the industry level. And that's unfair that's unfair to any of the industry players who are involved in these discussions. If at some point, you know, we get this sort of clear vision and this is what's going to happen, to pull back some of this work that's already going on, I think just becomes more difficult, and it's unfair to those who are involved in those conversations right now. So I think having that role, more active role for government and a lead would I think get everyone thinking in sort of the same way, recognizing that person would not have necessarily, you know, legislative regulatory oversight or rights at this point in time, or powers. But I think those two things would help maybe to get us a bit more focused on moving this forward in the short term.
Maybe I'll go to Alina and then I'll go to Saba. Alina, like I know TD, like in the US, you know, through the models like Akoya, has been a big part of the solution, trying to solve for this issue of growing scraping volumes. How do we move to a more secure ecosystem? Love to hear your views on what are the things we could do.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, you know, chipping away at the problem, kind of, you know, one relationship at a time, and, you know, one contract at a time is a really difficult endeavor. And I mean, it's, you know, endlessly entertaining for me as a lawyer and negotiating all this. But at some point, you know, it's kind of like I've had this discussion one too many times. But so definitely there's something to be said to kind of the moving things along through the creation of a network. So your reference to Akoya, really, for those who don't know it, the concept really is a utility player that would allow entities providing data to plug in, and entities receiving data to also plug in through APIs and really have a conduit of information. And the premise of it is, you know, it could, I mean, the way it's being looked at the US is that there will be a kind of a common minimum certification level. But then each independent, each data provider can actually make choices in terms of who to provide the data to. But, you know, I mean, that's one model. It could have a variety of applications, and, you know, this kind of middle utility kind of player could do n number of things, or could do as little or as much as needed. So from you know, without that kind of government direction, if you will, and kind of the incentive that a government would provide in order to move things along, I think the best next thing would be for the industry to coalesce around this kind of thing. And I mean, you know, there's a variety of players that I think could fall into this spot. I could see payment networks trying to you know, having an interest in doing this, and they have a lot of experience over the years managing, you know, movement of money. So movement of data probably is somewhat in their bailiwick as well. But it's yeah, it's a potential solution. It's interesting to me that it hasn't really I haven't seen it in other jurisdictions. I mean, other than in the US, and it may be very well because other jurisdictions have really focused on the regulatory framework and have laid out that groundwork, so you don't actually have so much use of that kind of utility. I don't know if Ben or Saba, you have thoughts or as to why that is, why it hasn't been tried before. but yeah, I think that's it's a promising option at this point.
Yeah, maybe Alina, to add to that, I think the Akoya model in the US, you can see that kind of being a thing that folks would coalesce around, just given the fractured nature, I think, of the number of both financial institutions and fintechs. And, I think you guys alluded to it earlier too, as time passes, hopefully we'll get this right, and we'll maybe the time will give us an opportunity to do things a little bit differently, a little bit more innovatively. But, to the original question of what signals, I think speed is unlikely to occur right now from a government perspective, but if they could focus, that would be good. And I do think some of the conversations around, let's say, accreditation criteria, as an example, the types of entities who should participate, why not focus and pick one thing apart and try and address that, is where they could help. Because I definitely agree with Ben. In the absence of that, industry players are going to make certain decisions. So the industry will move, but it's not going to move on its own, because an industry this is a two-part. This is consistent of the people who have the data, who are sharing with third parties. So we're going to need input from all those entities in order to align on something. The risk obviously being that we're going to make maybe some decisions that contradict where the government is thinking, but also that might help. In this case, maybe we rely on the market influencing where the government should land by signaling what's acceptable from a market perspective. So, there's some benefit to, if you can get agreement across certain players and start to show some traction, start small, but move, because I think that's what everyone is interested in. Some of these things don't get resolved until you test them. The contract's not going to be perfect on day one. And if we tried to do that, we'd be sitting here for 2 years trying to work on it. So let's start with something, go with an MVP concept, and get something real in market, I think is important. And I think that might help actually spur more regulatory concepts on.
Thanks, everyone.
Actually, sorry, Juan, I was going to pick on this, something that's about a reference, because I've been thinking about it quite a bit, and she kind of had like a half a sentence about it, but I think it's a key piece from the government perspective, or rather the advisory committee, I guess, but also all of the regulators. I think, we're so, like, the problems around open banking aren't really, or the risks around open banking, they're not particular to open banking. They're well known, right? Like, we're talking about, privacy, security, fraud. I mean, these have been, so they're so well known that I think part of the challenge is that the government is looking at it to solve all the problems at the same time. And the piece that you said about, focusing and trying to, how about we start, with a smaller scope, start with this, try to expand. And especially when it comes to the customer protection piece, I know, it's dear to a lot of people's hearts, and I can see from a regulator perspective that it's very important. But at the same time, it's problems that even the European models haven't really solved that well. The challenges around, okay, if something goes, bad happens, how do we make the customer whole? And it's like, it's not even a conceptual question, is we need to stand that up, have like, all the interactions mapped out. That's like, and there's only one layer. There's so many other challenges, right? And if we're trying to solve everything at the same time, this could take, very well, 10 years just for legislation to coalesce around, holding stuff. I was like, no, don't say that. But thank you for mentioning that, because I've really been mulling it over. And yes, I think focus on maybe try to tackle maybe 2 problems as opposed to, the gamut. That might help.
I think it's worth noting, though, like, these problems have all been solved before. I think we sometimes get stuck in this trap in Canada about thinking, feels like times we think about we're solving for all of the open banking issues, right? Like, the reason the UK and Australia and others went down a government-led path was because in order to achieve those, I think, generally shared objectives of increasing innovation, competition, economic growth, while also improving consumer welfare, doing it piecemeal doesn't actually solve those problems, and it just in some cases makes some of those issues worse. So I get the desire, and I get frustrated on this one because I totally understand the desire to find the incremental pieces and solutions that will at least help us say that we're moving forward, but we're not really. Like we know what the opportunity is, we can see the problems, we know there's a solution, and I know I'm obviously making this sound super simple, and I appreciate it's not, but this incremental thinking, I think, only hurts us in the long run. And getting this up and running as quickly as possible, like this is actually, I think, in more cases, a regulatory innovation issue, because it's so easy to say it's going to take us so many years to get the legislation and the regulation, and it's like it's true, like you can't argue with that, but that feels like its own problem that needs to be solved for as well. And I know the likes of Senator Deakin and others have been, you know, really advocating on this point that we shouldn't allow, you know, the challenges around building regulation in this country continue to stifle innovation. And we're seeing it on the payment side as well. It was great to see that RPOF was actually included in this budget. What was missing was any reference to the Canada Payments Act, which would be the lever for opening up access to the payments infrastructure. So again, another example of like some of these incremental steps that, yes, are good, but when we don't know where we're going, only create more confusion and frankly, frustration.
I think the piece that we can agree on, Ben, is that we're all frustrated by time here. And I think the debate is really just how do you accelerate it? Is it, do we try to solve for everything, you know, at once and take a big chunk of work on? Is that going to help us move this forward and get it done? Are we all going to end up at this takes 2 years no matter what approach we take, which I hope not. And so the comment on really trying to solve specific problems that we feel are the ones that are perhaps of greatest debate, if you will, that could resolve that debate is really, you know, the concept there, not, you know, take it necessarily incrementally, because I feel like there's some things that could use some help and could use some guidance. And I thought it was promising that at least there was a breakaway from the last consultations to focus on an accreditation framework, so people don't feel like it's being, you know, solved by just one industry group or in the hands of a small set of individuals. So those are things where I think we could use some help, but I think we're all hopeful for this to be accelerated and not elongated.
I would love to maybe get your thoughts in each one of you around like what is the North Star that we're actually striving towards? Because I think that the timeline and the complexity is also a little bit dependent on that. And if based on my view, when I think about like whether it's screen scraping or whether it's actual valuable consumer offerings like financial planning, retirement planning, and others, it's very evident to me that at minimum the North Star cannot be open banking, right? At minimum it has to be open finance, or it needs to be bigger than that, right? And as we get more competitive, but obviously as we go there, it's even going to be incredibly more complex a thing to solve for. So I'd love to get your thoughts on like what is the thing we're solving for, because I think that probably also dictates what needs to be done to get there. Maybe I'll ask Lena to start.
So as the lawyer in the room, I don't know if you want to ask the lawyer what the vision for. So I think I'll defer it to more because honestly, the North Star from my perspective would really just, probably not be, again, it would be really slanted to
one contract, isn't it? A simple contract.
Yeah, that's the North Star. Click through, don't bat an eyelash. So Saba, if you want to take it away.
We'll get to EULAs one day. No, what does the North Star? I think it's a great question because that's really what you anchor yourself around. And for me, sure, we could say screen scraping or open finance, but I think it's about it. Where a lot of this started was on data ownership and data rights related to the consumer. So I think our anchor should also be around that. And when we think of what the promise of this, we're starting with open banking, but should this be a conversation on open data? What about my healthcare data? What about other sources of information that I have do I really control that information, and how can I make it easier, reduce the friction in really any engagement or service that I have, to have access to certain basic rights or basic services. So, I think the North Star has to be about consumer rights and consumer protection, but also ownership as it relates to the data. Ideally, through that, we get to things like the end of screen scraping and other benefits and activities.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not just a vision. I mean, that's a reality now with Bill C11 and the consumer data or individual data portability rights that are in there. As a law of general application, the responsibility now falls to the different sectors to implement it. And I think, the point that many have been making over the last few years is, open banking is just the expression of that right, that while still very new and very unclear as to what it will mean for people and how they'll use it and all of those things, I think it's better to have that than not have that. And that's sort of your starting point. I think open banking provides a really great opportunity to help people start to understand what that means for them as individuals. And the point about open finance as the minimum is in the world of financial services, the right mindset. If you think about what's going on in the UK right now, screen scraping is still very prevalent because in order to draw the sort of insights and leverage the data, just having your transaction, checking account transaction data doesn't actually enable you to draw a ton of insights. You need the savings account data and the investment data to really bring to life some of these insights that PFM tools and financial advice tools will start to make more available to the average individual. And so being smarter about your finances, in some cases automating your finances when you get into the world of payments initiation, like these are some of the promises. And I think, not to get too philosophical here, but all of this is about putting in place some of the infrastructure that we need to run a digital economy. And that we talk about the digital economy as though it's like this, the white papers, and it's this thing we will someday see, but we're firmly in it. The pandemic has accelerated transformation across the board, and I think it's also highlighted that the infrastructure, the digital versus the physical infrastructure that we need to run that economy efficiently and in the interests of all individuals, needs a lot of work. And this is a good starting point to put those pieces into place.
Thanks, Ben. I can't agree more. I don't think any of these are like science fictions, right? Like if you without going far, look at like DBS, right? As of January this year, now they're extending their NAV planner, like they're like basically always on financial planning capability to all their customers, even if they have zero product with DBS. And it's because I think that market moved to that model, and like I can't shake the thinking when I look at that. Like I'm pretty sure like TD would love to do things like those, right? To better serve TD customers. So like how do you actually get there? I think it's the golden question.
Well, and I think too, I mean, the risk for the incumbents is if and when some of those banks from other markets want to become bigger players in the Canadian space. HSBC is an example, who's been very active on the open banking front in the UK and Europe. When we get to this world where that data is more available, they'll have 3, 5, 7 years of practical application of this technology and of these insights, ready to just jump in and start to offer these services that Canadian banks and financial institutions should also be delivering. And I think we won't get there until we're forced to get there. And that that forcing function is something that the government is meant to do when it's in the best interest of the country.
I think one of the things the traditional open banking conversations have been limited by is by looking at this as a really a one-way flow of data, right? Like everybody, it, when they think about ASSPs or the data custodians, they always think about banks, and then they think about fintechs as the data consumers. But I think in these dialogues around open finance and how to get there, I think it's probably absolutely critical how we get to truly a more of a data ecosystem view rather than data leaving from one party to another. And I think concepts like reciprocity play a big role in enabling that. So would love to hear your thoughts on whether we could actually do something differently here. That moves beyond just like the singular dictating these 5 banks or these all the federally regulated banks must share into something that looks more like a vibrant data ecosystem.
Alina, go ahead if you want to start.
I just the data reciprocity concept is really intriguing. In concept, it's a bit it's a bit hard to see in practice. I mean, we have to remember that, going back to Saba and Ben's point, it's really about controlling your own data. So like what I wanted to just make clear for the audience is that data reciprocity doesn't mean that if an entity makes its data available because a consumer wants it to go somewhere, then automatically that consumer's data will just go to the other entity. Like, it's still premised on an interest from the consumer to get services from that initial entity where the data is coming from. So essentially, without putting those services out on the table, right? Data reciprocity really, like, it doesn't really exist. I mean, it's a concept. I think the only thing you could say about it is that there would be some sort of notion that if you are to be provided the data, you have to make your data available on request. But again, without having those services that entice customers into like wanting to use them and leverage the data from elsewhere, it doesn't really come into being into practice. So when you referred to Bill C-11, which I'm fairly certain is now been put to sleep for a while. I don't know if it was mentioned in previous, but hopefully it'll get resurrected sooner rather than later. It was an interesting take because it was premised as a general right, but then in its application, it was to be applied through regulations that are industry specific. So, it wasn't really getting fully there to this notion of like a clean data right? It was premised on having regulations that set out the parameters for certain industries. So I think in a way, data reciprocity is just going to like, if we do have a concept, whether it's regulator or it becomes just an understood concept in the Canadian space, that customers essentially have the right to control where their data is directed to, then this data reciprocity will essentially come into being just by having these entities provide, useful services that entice customers to have their data moved.
I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? And in a market like Canada, where there are 5 or 6 banks who control, 90+% of the market, not to have any one of those organizations not participate or deliver this whole of market solution, if you will, kind of defeats the purpose. Because if it's only open banking for me because I bank with one of these banks that is providing data, but my wife banks with someone else that doesn't, the system kind of breaks, which is why you fundamentally need this whole of market solution. The reciprocity question was one I never really understood what the big deal was. And by that, I mean, if you get into this system, I get the economic interest piece, but like the idea that if you get into the system, if you're accredited to be a participant, you need to make your data, the data that you have on customers available, just as any other organization. And so like that free flow of data, that's how it kind of gets started, but you need that starting point. One of the most interesting comments I heard on reciprocity actually came from Scott Farrell, who led the review of open banking in Australia, and who's now doing the same thing for the payments initiation piece or the right access piece. So I was on a panel with him, and he said like the ultimate outcome of open banking for him was that not that fintechs would get new customers, but that banks would win back customers. And I think what he was saying is this idea of, we were talking about, the reality is, regardless of how good a fintech solutions are, banks still have they have the trust, they have the brand, they have the resources far beyond most new entrants. And so the ability for them to win back customers because their products and services are so great, they've brought these new insight engines into place, and they are actually not acquiring customers just because that's where that account, person's account was set up when they were 10 years old, but because they're really delivering value-added services. Like that, I think, is at the core of what this reciprocity component could do.
I don't think I'm going to disagree with anything other Alina or Ben has said, because it has to be a give to get model. And I don't understand why someone would agree to be in the ecosystem but not contribute that data if we're really saying that this is predicated on consumers saying, hey, this is what I want to have accessible and by whom. If you're in that ecosystem and you want to take advantage of the benefits that it provides, you should be able to contribute your data to that ecosystem as well. So I think that's really important. And then obviously I think the question has to be answered not only in a one-time perspective, but as data grows, because I think if we're all saying, hey, our North Star is something more than just open banking as it stands today, what could that growth actually look like? I think is going to be really important to how do you consider reciprocity as data scope expands?
Thanks, everyone. We do have a question from the audience. I'm just going to paraphrase. Digital walls are always under attack. Malicious individuals, organized crime, adversarial governments, money laundering using AI. How do we protect against these risks? So like, how do we protect against these risks being amplified as the accessibility to data grows?
I can maybe start, Juan, and definitely look for Ben and Alina's input on this. So I think we've all talked about a few things. So first is making sure that there's a minimum standard of security and protection obligations that are met no matter who the player is in the ecosystem. Ideally, moving towards APIs is going to help, but they're not foolproof, as the questionnaire kind of alluded to. Anything really can be breached. So to me, this comes with strong data governance, data protection, data minimization approaches, etc. Authentication protocols are going to need to be key. So how do we really ensure that the person who's requesting the data is authorized to do it? So step up methods for authenticating the users who are coming in through the fintechs, I think will be something to consider. But I don't think it's one simple answer. I do think you have to look at all points of vulnerability, not just the fintech, but also the bank where the data is coming from and the mechanisms that they're using as well, and make sure that they're all considered from a security perspective. Because as the questionnaire alluded to, a lot of this comes from organized crime. Like they're going to find the weak spot and they're going to exploit it. It's not a mom and pop shop that's doing this. These are sophisticated actors who are going to take advantage of things like credentials that have already been breached out there in the market and try to use the mechanisms that are now being more accessible to gain access. And those are the difficult ones to solve for, because that's not an actual issue within the system itself. That's an issue that's happened elsewhere through a different problem, like a breach that maybe had nothing to do with open banking or the participants in open banking. So I don't think unfortunately, it's not an easy answer, but I do think you have to look at all the points of vulnerability and have the appropriate procedures in, and then apply some sensitivity based on the data that's being accessed as well. Like not all data is equal in this ecosystem.
I think one of the sorry, I think maybe just an added point. One of the interesting, I don't know if it's theoretical or if there's actually, I think there's some practical sort of tangible observations here, but one of the things that some of the aggregators I think are now in a position to sort of understand, like the Plaids and the Oatleys of the world, is to see some of, because they've got this holistic view, and I think the thinking is that like that sort of ability will exist more broadly in an open banking environment, to see things like credential stuffing and be able to share those insights across the network will actually help some of this. As I think Sab has well put, this isn't so much an issue of prevention as it is an issue of resilience. Like these issues are going to happen open banking or not, but there are some interesting potential benefits that might come along with having a more holistic view of the data that's being shared, again, on a secure and standard basis within a thriving open banking ecosystem.
Great. So maybe one last question for you guys. Oh, Elena, did you have anything to add?
No, that's. I know we're tight for time, so let's go to the next one.
So maybe the last question I'd like to ask you guys is, I think we are all recognizing that we are behind, right? And even the bars keep moving in other markets, whether it's the Singapore or Australia and other markets. But if there's any hope, we'd love to hear your thoughts on whether we have any opportunities we can actually leapfrog, given where we're starting from. What are the things we could do, or what are the areas we can explore that our model is actually leapfrogging even some of the other markets and where the other markets the journeys are at?
Maybe we should let the eternal optimist answer that question first.
I'm also an eternal optimist. It must have been in the beginning. Who's the eternal optimist?
Alina, you should know by now that I'm the eternal optimist.
Then you guys go first.
Yeah, I was the optimist, Ben, and then this panel started. So, and we reminded ourselves about the challenge of timing. But I forever hopeful, and I think we have to challenge ourselves as Canadians. Like, the reason we're doing this again is about consumers, but it's about innovation and the promise that it offers, improving our GDPR, becoming a more competitive nation. So can we go beyond just this debate on open banking, where we seem to be so focused, and get into more of an open data, open finance conversation? Like, what forces can we use to drive that? And I'm hopeful that market forces will solve for some of it, in the absence of getting something fully, regulated or implemented in here. So, because we all know the competition it can drive, and Ben alluded to it. I think some of this is really going to benefit the banks, who are going to be able to offer more innovative services and experiences to their customers. Canadians trust their financial institutions significantly. They don't change a lot. They don't transfer their accounts and much. And they maintain those relationships for a long period of time. Now, that may shift, obviously, with consumer preferences, but I think there's an opportunity here to spur innovation and competition at that level, and so that's what I'm hopeful for, because I do think competition helps bring about the most innovative services at the end of the day.
To add on to this notion of spurring innovation, and given that the budget just came out, one challenge that I keep thinking of is, and especially with the previous question that we talked about, the notion that we really just continuously have to step up on security, and also tied to the notion of accreditation, and how do you get these entities essentially to a level that is sufficient to actually be able to receive this information that could ultimately be used for fraud. Just in practical terms, especially like new entities, there's so much complexity to all these security controls and accreditation. There's so much expense to doing certification and all these things, right? And I think, it goes back to the government, but that is kind of part of what they do. Would be this notion of tax credits or some sort of innovation, and I think I noticed something around innovation, but I think it was really related to digital infrastructure. I don't know if any of this around security would fit into that. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but one way to tackle it, essentially is to enable that innovation, is to say, okay, how do we make it easier for you to actually meet these? They're high standards, like they require a lot of expense, and they require continuous resourcing. It's not a once and done. It's a you do it this year and you have to continuously do it and up the game. So that's my budget wish list suggestion for next time.
I'm not generally an optimist. I think one area where Canada has shown some leadership that I think could help accelerate some of our open banking work when we get there, if we get there, is around digital identity. I think this is a problem that many other countries sort of just jump down the path of open banking without necessarily having the right solution set for the right, so I think the work that's been done in Canada on this is potentially something that might help accelerate some of our work around authentication and security and all that sort of stuff. But we have to get to the point where we're applying that on a larger scale basis. And while I was not surprised in any way to see the open banking, even references to open banking in the budget, I think it's no less frustrating, and I think just adds additional uncertainty. Again, we will get there. This is not a trend we can stop. It's not cyclical. But how we get there, when we get there, and just how far behind we'll be is the things that I worry most about. So leapfrogging shouldn't even be in our vocabulary at this point as it relates to open banking. We just need to.
John, you should have ended with either me or Saba, because
Optimists.
But I do like the digital. It's a very good point. To turn it back to the optimist side, yes, the digital ID piece definitely, I think, would be and going back to the notion of security, there's a lot of potential there to essentially mitigate fraud risk by putting that in place. So there's concerted effort there.
Well, I think with that, I just wanted to thank you guys again for joining the panel. I think actually conversations like these, that gives me hope, because I think there are actually more commonalities about where we actually want to get to. And I think, I think people like you, I think, are driving how to make this a reality. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and over to the organizers to take us to the next session.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Juan.